Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsor, Mix-On Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mix-On is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free, to their 24-hour customer service support, Mix-On is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now, you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns, a bunch of them you have even heard about on this very show. Sam Quinnen is a great example. He actually showed one of those products that makes some prints because he uses them for certain books. And they offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And makes them can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to mixum.com. And they're actually running a really cool promotion right now where listeners of my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount off their first order. And I know and you know that printing comics is expensive. Every percentage point matters, whether you're doing indie, self-funding, you're on Indiegogo, Kickstarter, every percentage point matters. So that is mixam.com. Type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to get a 5% discount on that very order. And I have with me returning guest, and I think it's the third time, is David Whalen.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for having me on for the
show.
third time. Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it for the big number 3. It's a trilogy. Yeah, no. It's our trilogy.
see, this is funny because we were just speaking about Star Wars before, and we were talking about the original trilogy. And we were having a discussion about ranking them.
That all came together, didn't it?
Everything is connected, and then Kevin Bacon will pop out of nowhere.
Nice.
It's all 6 degrees. It's all 6 degrees.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But pretty much, I think we're going to be talking about 2 things. And they're really only 2 things we're going to be talking about with your books. Mm-hmm. But I do want to catch everybody up. What is the short pitch for those who don't know of what is correct-handed comics? And I'm holding up this hand for a reason.
Well, Correct-Handed Comics is a comic book company I started about 5 years ago, and correct-handed does mean left-handed. There's right-handed and there's correct-handed, and I try my hardest to put out quality, fun, entertaining books. I have an ongoing series where I've started to shift to call it a 50-issue maxi series because I always plan to do 50 issues. So trying to make sure now that I'm about to put issue 17 out tomorrow. Trying to make sure people know that there is an ending, that it's not an ongoing series that you have to buy a billion books for. It's going to be 50 issues from start to finish, and it's going real strong. I'm super proud of this next issue that's coming out tomorrow, issue 17. I put out one-shots of different genres, 4-issue miniseries, graphic novels. I have my own novel that's a Western, and you can find everything on correcthandedcomics.com, and I think there's something there for everybody.
And we've gone through this in the last 2 interviews, so I don't want to spend too much time because you have a particular book I do want to talk about that sort of is a Halloween horror one-shot that it hasn't exactly come out, yesterday per se, but it's relatively new. It definitely fits the Halloween vibe, and that's the Sock Hop Killer, which is a 26 one-shot. And it's dealing with a lot of stuff moving in and out of it. There's a lot of moving parts. And we're going to dive into it in a second. But what is the basic premise of this comic? Because I've obviously read the description. I may or may not have picked something up on it. I may or may not be spooked out. Not as spooked out as a bug jumping on my shoulder during work today. That was not fun. That was not fun. I legitimately jumped out, and I was on a Zoom call. Like, 5 people laughed at me. It was not fun.
But those bugs will get you every time, right? Those bugs. I think that's what Starship Troopers was based off of. Somebody got a bug jump on them, and next thing you know, there's a script.
No, it was a real bug. It was a real bug, and it was not fun. And I was trying to avoid it, and I saw it crawling. It was not fun, guys.
Those bugs will get you.
It scared me. I was very, very scary, and it was not pleasant. But anyway, getting back to the comic here. What is the basic premise of this book? Because there's a lot of stuff going on in it.
Yeah, so like I said, I have multiple genres that I like to write, and then I have interest in try to get my thumb in a bunch of different kind of pies. And I grew up watching the old slasher flicks of the 80s, Freddy Krueger, Mike Myers, Jason Voorhees, all those slasher guys. And I was actually running in the woods about a year ago or so, and I laid down to do the stuff out there, and I kind of looked around. And you get that feeling, you know what I mean? Like that feeling. So I started looking around. I'm like, oh, that means I've got to do. I've got to find. Like, I've got to figure out like a slasher type book to write, to draw. So I started thinking about things that I'd never seen, and one of the things that I'd never really seen was something that took place a little bit further back in time, so the 50s, because I love the 50s. I love that era, the greasers and the sock hops and all that kind of stuff, hence the title. And and while one of my favorite slasher movies does have a female killer for the first installment of the franchise, I had never really seen a female killer to this extent. So I started to like really think about the look of a 50s female serial killer, and out of that came the sock hop killer. I was struggling a little bit with the plot, so I called a buddy of mine, Paul Dulsky from the Everything Horror podcast, and I said, "Hey, I've got this idea. I think you're the guy to talk to." And we talked for about 20 minutes, and within 10 minutes, he had helped me with all the issues that I had with the plot. It helped me really hone in on what the character was, really hone in on the story that we wanted to tell, because he had some great ideas, things that I didn't even think of, and we were able to condense it down into that 26 pages. I always say that in any of my one shots, there's more there. There's always more story in between the pages. And with the sock hop killer, that's definitely true. But if you're a fan of those slasher flicks from the 80s and the Halloween Kills and all that stuff that's coming out now, you'll be a fan of the sock hop killer. It's black and white, so it's not really bloody. There is blood, but being a black and white comic, it's not really gory. It's not like intense. It's not in your face. But there's some things I think for anybody that's a slasher fan.
Yeah, and it goes even a little bit deeper than just the slasher elements of it. Obviously, a girl sort of gets heartbroken before a big dance, and the book really takes place within that time period between when she gets heartbroken before a big dance and all the way up to the big dance, essentially, and a little bit into the big dance.
Yeah.
And she's feeling pain, and then, out of the pain comes sort of this mystical mask / power that sort of runs deep in her family, and dealing with all of that and harnessing it, and maybe that power has its own agenda / corruption in it, and stuff is sort of going down, and that's where the entire slasher stuff comes in, and the body counts start. And it's very interesting because even going beyond the just traditional, I guess what I view as a slasher filter on it, we're now dealing with, you can make the argument that there's some type of sort of rage and mental illness, and that this mask is only enhancing what's already there to some degree, and sort of also control of power and all that stuff. And there's a lot of stuff going on here that you could dive deeper. You could read it on the surface. And what was that like really building that stuff out? Because when we start going into this book, you can read it on multiple levels. You can read it on a mental health level. And there's a lot of stuff. It's very similar to a lot of your other books that you've done in the one-shot area, where there's multiple levels that an adult can read it very different than a child can read this.
Yeah, and that's what I try to do. Like I said, there's always, with only 24, 25, 26 pages to work with, I try to make sure that I leave some things to the reader, for them to be able to connect to be able to have the characters seem as real as possible, and to be able to show those weaknesses. For me, in all my characters, it's not Superman, it's not Batman. There are true weaknesses in these characters that even some of the superhero characters that I've done, that I think that really help me connect as a reader to characters from other people's stuff. So I would say that that's a big influence on me, to be able to make sure that the characters that I create are very flawed, very, very real characters, very real people who you could just know in your everyday life. And I think the sock hop killer, the two main characters, if I could say it that way, are both very knowable, very noble people that might even be a family member.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying not to ruin it because I want people to go buy it.
Yeah.
It's hard to do it because when you have 26 pages, it is a very short story. It's not like we're going to talk about the Offsprings in a second here, which is a much larger, playing field to play into. But, obviously there's a lot of stuff. And what I like about this in a lot of ways is that it's very much a Halloween type comic where it is extremely fitting for Halloween. You could read it at any point. If you like slashers, please feel free to read the entire book at any given point. But it's definitely fitting for the month of October. And that's why we're really talking about it, because this is sort of in that spooky vibe. When I think of a slasher flick like Jason or others or Michael Myers, I definitely think of Halloween. I don't think of, Michael Myers in the middle of December, for lack of a better word. Not saying that somebody can't get slashed on Christmas. Sure. I'm just saying that it's very fitting. What is that like for you, though, as a comic book creator and having the ability to run this company and all that stuff, to actually have a book that really plays kids towards a certain month? Because this is sort of fits perfectly into October.
Yeah, and that was really the plan. Like I said, a big fan of all that stuff. And when I designed the Sock Off Killer, I really wanted to make her be as recognizable from the get-go as possible. So there's always a mask involved. So there's the mask, and there's her outfit, and there's the weapon that she uses, and it all kind of works together from the poodle skirt to the ponytail. You really get I think you get a 50s vibe from her, even though the whole thing does not take place in the 1950s. It's still very recognizable, and it's something that I think transcends the time, because we have enough, I think, here in the 21st century, still connection to that era, especially as Gen Xer, that connection to that era with so many things that we grew up with watching from the 50s and listening to all that music. So I think that while it is 70 years ago, it still feels like, especially someone my age, that it was just yesterday that music was being played by our parents, that those characters were being shown on television in Happy Days and Grease and The Outsiders, and pick a million other movies and TV shows that we watch. So giving the killer that classic vibe, to me, made the character very much entrenched in the 50s, but still timeless, because it's that bygone era that for its pros and its cons, for its goods and its bads, everybody can remember the poodle skirts and the ponytails.
Yeah, and also everybody knows what the 50s looks like. I hate to say this, and I'm going to get flack for it, but nobody remembers the 60s in a lot of ways. Everybody remembers the 70s. People remember the 80s if you're a nerd, because that was like the greatest age of cartoons.
Yeah.
The 90s are getting interesting now, because that's my generation. Yeah. But I don't remember the 90s. I don't know what people are talking about when they're like, they're referring to the 90s. I thought the 90s sucked. I thought
some good stuff. 90s had some good stuff.
I
was in my 20s. I was in my 20s ish in the 90s. From the music to movies, and it was all right. I think it'll be looked upon more fondly in the next few years, because there's a lot of good stuff there.
It's also getting that 90s show, so it's going to be very interesting.
Isn't that hilarious that we're getting that 90s show, and we're like, oh, that 70s show is so nostalgic, and I still remember the 90s like it was yesterday.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. The greatest thing came out of the 70s that people don't even know. Mm-hmm. And it's Starbucks came out of the 70s. Yeah. For those who don't know, Starbucks is 50 years old. It came out in 1971. Yeah. So technically, one of the greatest things that people go to and people spend a lot of money with every year is Starbucks. Go figure that out in the 70s. I just learned that today. That's wild. Crazy. Small world. But getting back to the comic, because obviously I've read the comic, and it's very iconic. What you can instantly get it, and I think people also understand symbols, and I think that's why the 1950s era was popular and why it's timeless. It's very symbol-oriented, but this isn't your first one-shot. You've done a bunch of other things like Shady Lady, I Won't Stop, Will Aliens Do My Homework, which is in my Kickstarter bundle, guys. So if you want to pick that book up, there's 24 books in my bundle for $12. I'm not even kidding. Like, I went hard and I might even find like another 5 in the next few days. Or if we hit certain goals, I might add like another 24. So I'm just saying, I might go and do something crazy with that. But what is this like for you to write short? Because anybody I feel can write long at this point. You know, writing something in 500 words or writing something in 26 pages and having a beginning, a middle, and an end that ties up nicely and hits certain points and actually is a standalone is a very unique skill. And we're starting to see in comics that a lot of companies are doing one-shots, but they're doing 72-page one-shots. And that's really, at that point, you're just writing a long-form 3-issue thing, selling it in a longer story. You're not really, you're just changing your distribution method versus writing a one-shot. So I'm curious how you feel about that, and even what is like finding the balance and all that stuff, because it is such a unique skill to be able to do one-shots and do them well. And with your works, as I sort of stated before, you're hitting it the nail on the head in a lot of ways.
Oh, well, I'm trying my hardest. I think with bigger companies now, I think they're starting to realize that maybe especially for our generation who has the money to be able to buy the books, and the trades are a little bit easier to pick up at this point. I think when we were growing up, it was you go down to the Circle K, the 7-Eleven, the gas station, whatever it is, you pick up a couple comic books for 25 cents. You can't really do that anymore. It's now the comic book shop, specialty shops. You can find some at Walmart, that kind of stuff, and they're getting back into that. But I think that now the average teenager or child can't just walk down to the 7-Eleven and buy themselves, a Spider-Man comic. So I think that going from individual issues, which I don't think that'll ever stop, but going to more trades and going to more long-form writing, but collecting them in one big graphic novel, 72 to 100 pages, I think is really a smart move for the big boys. Because it gives people like me a chance to be able to read a story from beginning to end and have enough bang for your buck, right? For someone in my position that is really trying to draw in readers, having it something that's a 24-pager from beginning to end, and have it be 99 cents on Comixology or $2 on Amazon, I think is a good way to be able to give people a chance to be able to read what I'm about, to read my style, to see my style, to understand the kind of storytelling that I do. And for one shots, it can be difficult sometimes. There have been times where I've had 24 to 20. I try to keep myself between 24 to 26 pages. There have been times where I've had to cut some stuff that I really liked because I realized that was at 32 pages. And I'm like, oh, that's while 32 isn't that big a deal, I pull the stuff that I know maybe I can use later, and I try to make sure it doesn't take away from the story. And I try to make sure that I can wrap something around those pages that I do take away. But keeping it to those 24 to 26 pages, I think really gives people an opportunity to be able to pick it up, to flip through it, to like it, to decide if they want to do more, hopefully. And they're really, for me, it's about making those hard choices. Knowing the story I want to tell, knowing the characters before I sit down at the drawing table and saying, this is the story I want to tell with this character, this is the voice that I want this character to have, and this is the on some level too, like you talked about earlier, the I don't want to say social agenda because that's not really the right term, but using those social ideas, those ideas about society to really like pinpoint where the problem is, or what the problem is, or how the problem should be addressed, or whatever it may be. And I like being able to put those in there because it really makes it feel, while something that takes place in the 1950s on some level, still feel very fresh and very new and very topical.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and obviously a lot of these one shots that you do. And one of my favorite topics to talk about is the comic book business industry stuff. And there's been a major shift in moving into one shots and longer form content. And it's very interesting for me because I personally think to some degree that it's a mistake. I think the mistake is that a lot of companies, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is that I think they're trying to say, look, we don't know how to get our prices down, so why don't we raise our prices up to $9, put out a 72 pager, give more content, raise the price up, versus keeping the issue down to 22 pages and figuring out a way how to market into places like Walmart and get those big orders that eventually reduce your costs down, and also maybe print this stuff on cheaper paper and have it more on newspaper print, for instance. And I think that that's the mistake. And also, these comic companies are not in places like Walmart, not in 7-Eleven, they're not in Target. You know, if you put comics right next to baseball cards, they're more likely to sell, or you put them on the rack in the supermarket with the magazines, you know, and then you price it at $2 a pop. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that's going on with comics right now. And that's where I think Indie's making a bunch of mistakes as well, because I get it's expensive to produce a book, but you know, I mean, I could tell everybody how much I pay for my comics. I usually pay about $2.50 because I buy in previews, you know. But even still, $2.50 is a lot of money when comics legitimately 15 years ago were like $1.75.
Yeah.
It's clearly gotten very expensive for the average, you know, buyer. You know, 7-year-old Johnny can't go to the comic store and pick up 3 comics anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how you feel about that, because obviously you're in the business and you're in a publisher and you're an indie publisher, but obviously a lot of shifting has happened in the entire industry in the last, you know, 2 years. And I mean, this was coming. It just happened about 8 years sooner in reality, I feel.
Yeah. I think that for me as an indie publisher, clearly my main goal is eyes on the books at this point. And being an indie publisher, that can be very, very tricky, you know, especially the size that I am. I'm not a big corporation. I don't have a bazillion dollars. And trying to use social media and trying to use comic conventions and trying to use book signings and trying to use all those things to be able to get my books to as many people, to as broad an audience as possible. It can be tricky sometimes. I think for the big boys, like we said earlier, I think one of the biggest problems they have is that it's now become a market where they are selling to a certain kind of people rather than selling to everybody. And I think that, like we said, when we grew up in the 70s and the 80s, I can remember walking down to the gas station and buying those books. And
just to give more perspective, sorry for interrupting, you know WWE?
Yeah, I'm sorry, say it one more time, Andrew.
Do you know the WWE?
Oh, yes, yeah, WWE, sure.
I'm going to ask you a question, and it's going to be, you know, it's going to get us to the point. I think it is really going to highlight the problem that DC, Marvel, and Image has right now. Is who does WWE market to?
You know, it's always, I think on some level it's always that males 18 to 45.
So
right?
so that's not who WWE markets to. Yeah. WWE markets to everybody who's not a WWE fan. They don't market to their fans because they have their fans. Yeah. They don't care that WWE doesn't market to me. I have never seen a WWE ad in my life. I've seen a WWE email. I've seen a WWE ad on Fox when I'm watching the NFL on Sunday. That's different because that's marketing to everybody equally. But when they're running social media ads, when they're targeting certain things, when they're bringing in celebrities, they don't care. That's not for me. That's to get somebody else into it who's a Cardi B fan, who's a Machine Gun Kelly fan, or Bad Bunny at WrestleMania. Bad Bunny outsold everybody twice over at WrestleMania on merch there, and more people watched The Miz, Morrison, Damian Priest, and Bad Bunny in that match, and WrestleMania for that match. It was the highest grossing match on the card. Despite certain people saying, history is made, that wasn't the most important match. The Bad Bunny match was the most important match because it brought people into their product. And that's what I think a lot of people in the indie world don't understand, is that you don't need to market to me when you have your book out there. You don't need to market to me. You need to remind me it's there. You don't need to market to me. Like, I'm running a Kickstarter. I'm not marketing to anybody initially in the Kickstarter realm. I'm going corporate, mainstream, my network first. Then in week 2, you're going to see me pushing it out. But hopefully, if my strategy works, I'm going to be fully funded in week 1, which is the battle plan. And I have no problem stating it because it's obvious. So that's what I think is the biggest problem. At least that's what I see. And I'm curious how you feel about it, because I'm looking at it from the outside in, looking in, and you obviously are a publisher looking out. And so this is something that I've been having a lot of conversations with people publicly and privately, and it's such an interesting discussion to be had. I had one last night about this very topic as well, and I was on the other side where I was being interviewed. So I'm very curious how you feel about that.
First of all, I got caught most of your Just Joshing interview. You did great, and it was amazing. It was like a crossover. I loved it.
It was a crazy interview, and what we spoke about for like 2 hours was.
Oh yeah, I love going on Josh's show because he does it. He doesn't shy away from anything. He'll talk about anything, and I love it. It's great. But anyway, to address your question, it's kind of where I was going with it. With comic books only being sold in comic book shops, you're playing to your base that you already have. You know what I mean? Like the comic book collectors or the D&D guys or the whatever it is. But for me, it's like that reaching out to those 5, 6, 7, 10-year-olds that walk into the gas station with their parents and they see Spider-Man by the magazines and go, oh, it's only $2, Dad. But it's only, unfortunately at this point, like what is it, like $5 now for a comic book. But the kid says, oh, Dad, can I Spider-Man? I'll read it in the car. I won't bother you at all in the car if you read it, whatever it says. And maybe that kid has never had a chance to be able to see a comic book in real life because he lives. I know where I live. And I'm like I said, I'm an elementary school teacher. I'm sure that I'd say probably 95% of the kids that I teach on a daily basis have never held a comic book in their hand because it's not accessible to them. It's not in the gas stations here. They have to drive an hour to a comic book shop, and they don't have a driver's license. So they're not driving to the comic book shop.
Hey, some of them might. They're just not telling me.
Maybe they do. Maybe they're older than I think they are. But it's that accessibility that I think has been a real problem, I'd say, in the last 20 years. That to be able to hook in those new readers, selling just in comic book shops, most people aren't just going to randomly walk into a comic book shop, but everybody has randomly walked into a gas station before, and said, oh, this candy bar, oh, that soda, whatever. Oh, look, a comic book. I haven't seen one of these. I mean, I can't tell you how many times teachers have said to me in my 15 years as a teacher, and I say, oh, I really like comic books. They say, they still make comic books? Yes. What do you think all those movies are based off of? They're based off of comic books.
I have a great story about that. I went to a doctor, and I'm reading some manga / a comic book. The doctor looks at me, and my mom sort of takes it in her hand and says, what is this garbage you're giving him? And the whole thing about that is all the books now that I was reading are worth a lot of money. It's great. And then I sell them. And now it's like all the garbage that people were saying, and even some of the manga I was reading, some of it's really expensive to buy now. Yeah. Some of that stuff is out of print. There's no reason to reprint it. And some of those books were like $10, and now they're going for $50 a pop. And all that garbage, from 20 years ago is worth real money. It's kind of funny to me.
People see it as like disposed. The parents, especially, my parents were pretty good, but the parents before them, our grandparents just saw this, get this comic book out of here, and they throw it away. If their kid doesn't pick it up, they throw it away, not realizing that issue of Superman is going to be worth $20,000 in 15, 20, 30 years. So I think that, and I was very lucky. My parents realized that it was something that I enjoyed. And they like, yeah, buy your comics, just make sure you don't spend all your money on it. By the time I was 12, I had 3 jobs, so I had my money to be able to do whatever I want with. And I can only remember one time my dad I came up with a stack of comic books this big from the Circle K and eating my candy bars and drinking my soda. And he said, chill out on the comic books a little bit. That's too many comic books. And I said, oh, okay, Dad. And it was never brought up again because I'm sure I got better at hiding how many comic books I bought. But my parents were very behind me and knew that it was a way. First of all, it was a way to get me to read. I wasn't reading William Shakespeare when I was a kid. I was reading Spider-Man. Another little connection there. I was reading Spider-Man. I was reading Superman. I was reading Captain America. I was reading the Who's Who. Remember those Who in the Marvel Handbook? stuff that was a lot of reading to do for a 10-year-old. But I think it was one of the things that was the bridge into other stories, the bridge into the what are this called, the choose your own adventures, the bridge into long form novels, the bridge into reading things that that more classical. Not that the comic books are less than in any way, shape, or form. They're not. But it was definitely the bridge to be able to help me as a kid. And I think if more parents saw it that way as a literature based visual learning tool, then it wouldn't be looked down upon as much.
And that's spoken from an art teacher.
Exactly.
So there we go on that one.
Yeah.
And now I want to back out of controversial topics. And we're
Okay.
going to get into the offspring in 1 second here. But I do need to remind everybody that my friends at Lone Wolf Comics have an amazing Kickstarter running with Snowpaw #1. It's fully funded. It's over $10,000. It's right now up on Kickstarter. Rob and Mog Park are coming on a little bit later tonight, and we're going to talk about it. And yes, I'm going to be doing this exact same ad again on their show, which is going to be really funny because I don't think they're going to be expecting it. And if Rob is in the chat, I will find it really funny if he comments right now. But what Snowpaw deals with is that in 19th century Scotland, a fierce heroine with an adventurous spirit nearly gives in to the social expectations of her time, but a trite fairy tale ending is not to be as Cyrilla McKinley discovers her werewolf lineage, and her eyes are open to an existence of supernatural beings and creatures of fantasy. Cyrilla McKinley is Snowpaw, and as I stated, the Kickstarter is right now live, and it is from the creative team of Robert A. Moltari, Mog Park, Bruna Costa, Dave Lenz, and Dave Lenz is a phenomenal letterer. If you get Dave Lenz to work on any book, your book goes up a whole notch, and Katrina Rotes. And so if you would like to join the Wolfpack right now, you can by actually backing the Kickstarter at lonewolfcomics.com/Snowpaw, or you can check out right here on the ticker as it goes down there, and it's in the comments right here for all those who want to check it out. Recommended. I do not think you're going to be disappointed. Also, a bunch of stretch goals have been unlocked, and there's a bunch of really cool perks coming out. And some of those metal books, if I was not poor, I would be purchasing. But I am extremely cash poor at the moment. But getting back to you, I do want to talk about The Offspring because, as you stated, issue 17 is coming out. But before we get into that, you just released just recently, and my friend Larry is asking what book you do. I don't know if Larry's joking or not, but we're talking about it, Larry. It's The Offspring. What prompted the omnibus to come out, which is the first 13 issues? It's a big book, a lot of contents in it, and it's the first 3 volumes because it is a catching up point at this position right now for that. It's probably the cheapest and fastest way how to catch up.
I agree. I would say that the thing that got me to publish it is one of my 7 sins, my pride. I knew that I had a good story, good content, something that I was very proud of. And I knew that I was seeing issues 1 through 13. It's kind of like a first season. So to be able to put them all out together to give people an opportunity to be able to jump on and maybe a little cheaper option than trying to buy all the individual books, or a cheaper option than trying to buy the first 3 trades, collecting issues 1 through 13. And I saw it as an opportunity to be able to put some different stuff in there also. But it was really just a chance for me to be able to collect everything that I've done up to that point for the first season of The Offspring into one collection.
Even to go further, so obviously I'm a huge Zenesco fan, and they have a lot of omnibus books out there, and I happen to like those omnibus books. I think those omnibuses are really nice because they're easy. It's also one book. It's also, I don't have to go track down different components of it, especially when you're dealing with books like Wonderland, or if you're dealing with something like the Oz, realm they played in. And it's also, even going further into this, obviously I like the fact that something was bound into one book. It's also, I'm presuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's going to be a second omnibus at another point.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and that's the other thing, too, is that once somebody starts collecting omnibuses, they don't usually go back to trades the same way that they would go, where most people that I know, if you're collecting an omnibus, you stick with an omnibus because it looks nice in your shelf. It's structured in your shelf as well. Also, I'm the type of guy that likes putting big books on the shelf. I don't like putting little tiny floppy books on my shelf. No offense to anybody. I like putting a hardcover book or a book that actually looks like it's meaty and that it's also all there. And also, if somebody comes into my house and says, hey, what do you recommend? I could hand them something, and all of a sudden what starts happening is that they now have a complete story. So what was that like, really, even from the marketing point? Because it's another way how to recycle a product that's already developed.
It was fun to be able to say, hey, individual issues. Hey, trade volume 1, 2, and 3. Hey, omnibus. To be able to give people as many different options as I possibly could, and to be able to have them to be able to continue to advertise, as much as I could for all the trades, all the volumes, the omnibus, all the one shots, and I just put out the trades for the first 4 one shots that I have. So all 4 of the first one shots that I have are out in trade also. So it's really just a great way to be able to, I guess, maybe reward myself and to reward readers.
Also, this is about you. It's not about your readers.
A little bit of both. I mean, it is my, me trying to get out my stories as best I can, but to be able to give people options to be able to say, this is a cheaper way to be able to get those 4 issues rather than trying to buy all 4 issues individually. The cover, for the individual issues, I always try to put in something for the trade and the individual issues. It's a little bit different, so you're getting a little bit of different content in there. But a lot of people want to see those 4, those covers for the individual issues. A lot of people want those, and they want them to be signed, especially conventions. A lot of people don't care about those covers. They want the story. For me, something like the omnibus was fun because you could definitely see the growth of the season. You know what I mean? Like, you started a first episode of a season 1 of a show, and you kind of look back on it as you get into.
Yeah, we're going to get into this.
Yeah, and you can start to see the change, the growth, the really pinpointing of the story.
Yeah, I want to catch everybody up real quick on The Offspring because, and I'm going to give the quick synopsis. Basically, Sarah, Will, and Vince pretty much have known each other for most of their lives. They each have powers, and they're codependent on each other. They sort of have friends that come in and out, and betrayal to some degree with some of this power, and things happen because of choices they've made, choices that other people made, circumstances they've been thrown into. And then all of a sudden, what sort of starts happening after a while is that it starts off sort of as I would call a kid's show in a lot of ways. And as we're now progressing into issues 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, it's become a hell of a lot more adult. Yeah. And we're now dealing with real issues in this, where they're time traveling, there are real consequences to their actions, being stuck in certain areas. They go back to the Deep South in the middle of the Civil War under Confederate rule, and one of the characters sort of takes on the personality of a Confederate lieutenant. And now we're not playing anymore in Kansas, for lack of a better word. Yeah. And so what is that like? Because obviously the first omnibus is touching upon where it starts becoming more adult. But now as we're progressing into this series, we're getting a lot more adult real quick. And I don't think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, and stop me at any given point, feel free to interrupt. But, it's this idea that your story's growing with your audience in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think so. The first 4 issues, I definitely wanted to introduce the characters, introduce their problems. They are, to me, real people. They have problems. They were all abused, and they all, like you said, have a very codependent relationship on each other. In some ways, very unhealthy codependent relationship on each other, just because of the way they've been brought up, the way they connect to each other mentally and emotionally. And if you've read or heard anything about the story, that mental connection of theirs is something that's very important to the story moving forward. So the first 4 issues is very much getting to know them, getting to know how they interact with each other, getting to know that they will, while they are good people in their early 20s, they're going to make mistakes. They do make mistakes. They say dumb things. They do dumb things. They make bad choices. They are in a point in their life where they are still bogged down by their past. They were all physically or mentally abused as children, and we touch on that in the first few issues. And you're absolutely right. As it starts to grow, very much I like to say that it's the monsters on the outside and on the inside. So they're fighting these monsters and wondering why the monsters keep coming at them so hard. But it's that analogy of the monsters on the outside, but they're also fighting their monsters inside also. And having that codependent relationship
So-
is helping, or in some cases hurting them.
I can give a really good example with a show that's grown with its audience. It's a very, very well-known show called Ruby. Ruby season 3 changed the way Ruby was, because season 1 and season 2, you knew the enemy was there, you knew there were problems. But at the end of season 3, this show went dark, and it went from being meant comfortably for a 9-year-old to going into like a 12-year-old territory, or even darker, and even going into seasons 4, 5, and 6. And the show has progressively gotten darker. And Rooster Teeth has made no qualms about where they were going to go with it, what they wanted to do with this. And so if you were starting to watch that show when you were 10, by the time you got to season 3, when you were 12, 13, you were in the correct territory.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very cool thing when that happens. And obviously your book is starting to deal with that. Obviously I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, is that I think in American history, everybody realizes that the Confederacy was wrong. But it is a part of American history. It's a very sensitive topic, and it's also a very heavy topic. And I don't think that, and whenever people start dealing with it, I know like John Carpenter dealt with it to some degree, but even going into that, what was that like? Because it is a very adult topic. It is a very topic.
Yeah, that can be tough, especially in this day and age. You're dealing with a lot of emotions. And I think that for me, it was making sure that people knew who the bad guy was, and that was the Confederacy. Clearly, bottom line, draw the line right there. And to be able to go into, I had some other ideas with it, but I really wanted to make sure that going into it, they knew, the people reading it knew that you're going to see Confederate flags, but you're not going to be waving them in the 21st century as, look how proud I am of this thing, of these people who left the United States. They were trying to separate themselves from the United States, make their own country so they could own other people. And that was really the thing I really wanted to hone in on from the very beginning. And then make sure that the three kids, as moving through time travel, searching for their fourth missing friend, would be able to fit in this world with a contemporary mindset, because they remember who they were for the most part. Like you said earlier, there's one character who struggled a little bit remembering who they were in the 21st century to some tragic stuff happening. But it was very much looking at a historical time and place that was horrendous, looking at it through the contemporary eyes of our characters, and pointing out where the problems were. And while this doesn't, it's not preachy, I don't think so. It's not preachy or soapboxy or anything like that. It very much says, these are the bad guys. We have to stop them doing from what they do. And then it shifts a little bit away from the actual Confederacy into one individual general in the Confederacy that is, we talked about monsters earlier, that is fighting to be able to make himself the monster that they're fighting. He's a continuing villain throughout the next few issues.
And also, I think that people are smart. I think that I've said it before when I'm dealing with issues. Obviously, I interview a lot of wrestlers, and it's always bad promotions. And I say, hey, we're all adults in the room here. We can talk about the good that a promotion did and realize that the person who's running is a horrible human being. We can talk about matches and certain things and understand that people are flawed, and that also there are bad actors, but it doesn't take away if you had a phenomenal match in the wrestling ring. And I think that, people are smart enough to realize that. And I think that people understand that when you're dealing with this stuff, well, it's just a setting. And once you draw lines, this is history. It's not erasable. And I think that's what writers are supposed to do. And I think people, for the most part, are very smart. I think a small minority of people just get outraged. And the saying is, you can't please everybody.
Yeah, for me, it's remember, learn our history, learn from the mistakes, and don't repeat them, and don't. I'm gonna say it, don't look on it with such big doughy deer eyes that you can't see the inherent problems that were had and what we can do to fix them in the 21st century, because we're still having some of the same issues for the last 50 years over and over and over again. And I think it's because um, oftentimes that history is ignored, or not spoken about enough, or maybe not taught in the right context, for people to be able to make those connections. And that can be tough.
It's also the fact that people in society in the last 50 years also have become more and more difficult to connect with. And there's a humanity problem globally that is also affecting this, where people are not connecting as they used to be able to.
Empathy is in short supply. I would agree with that.
And so, I'm having a hard time in my own life with certain people where bridges, with a particular friend, where the bridge is becoming shorter and shorter, or there's less planks in the bridge. And apparently it's just that connections are just misfiring. And then other people I'm connecting with on a different level, and it's very weird. And I think there's been a lot of stuff that's happened in the last 50 years where people have had less and less planks to connect with each other. But that's neither here nor there. I have another theory why we're having problems in the U.S., but I do not feel like pontificating.
We'll do that on number 4.
It'll make sense, and I think everybody would agree with me on it. And I think it's a really good point on that I would make, but I don't want to get in trouble because I'm going to get flack for it. Having said that, though, obviously issue 17 is coming out tomorrow.
Yes.
So is it coming out tomorrow, physical and digital, or just digital, or just physical, or is it going to be embedded into my brain and Elon Musk and you are working together?
Yeah, both physical and digital. Still getting up on Comixology. Anybody who's worked with Comixology knows that process is a little bit longer than some of the other platforms that you get off of. But print and digital tomorrow. This one is. I was lucky enough to be able to work with a great colorist, Chris McCauley, for the Civil War time travel story. So that was issues 14, 15, and 16. And his colors really popped and really made it feel like contemporary yet the past, and it was really fun working.
Felt like a princess again.
Exactly. So with issue 17, he had to stop because he had some things that he needed to do, and he's working with his own company. So he had to stop coloring for me, which is absolutely fine. And him and I still talk all the time. He's a great friend now.
He's out of the will, but it's not important.
But he'll still get a couple bucks here and there. But with issue 17, I'm back coloring, and I really think, quite honestly, with the ability to be able to stop for a second and let someone else take in the colors, really helped me to kind of hone in on what I wanted to do a little bit differently here in issue 17. And
I'm actually one of the best curious about that, because in my world, and this is just me, and I'm curious if you feel that way, sometimes I won't do something for 4 or 5 months and I just needed a break.
Yeah.
And it's not that I couldn't do it, I mean, at some point when I get back to my first podcast, I'm probably going to do editing for like a good 20 episodes, and then I might hand off editing to somebody else for like 15 episodes, just so I don't have to do it for a little bit. And then, because I've done that in the past, and I've taken a 10-week break from editing, not releasing, but editing. And then when I came back to editing, I was very much refreshed, and my brain was very much clear. And I'm curious if that's similar with you with coloring, where you're like, what is, I was drawing and coloring and doing stuff, and I just needed some time off away from this part of business because you get burned out, and I just needed almost a reset, if that makes any sense. And I think some people who are going to be hearing this are going to be like, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I don't know if I'm hitting it sort of on.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. It was something that, for me, the coloring, maybe for everybody, I would say it's probably the thing that takes the most time, because you're really trying to make everything pop. Not that you're not trying to do that with the lettering and with the inking and the penciling, but it's the for me the coloring that really hones in the tone on some level. And for me, it was taking those 3 issues off to be able to focus on pencils and inks and letters, and be able to know that, because I knew eventually it was going to be me again, to be able to go into my own brain and say, what do I want to do differently? How do I want to make sure that I match the tone and take it up to the next level? Walt doesn't used to say plus it. What can I do to plus it, to add to what I was already doing, but really take it to the next level? And I think that with issue 17, it not only continues the story that I've been really proud of over the last 16 issues, but it takes it to a next level and makes it very clear where the story is progressing moving forward. I try to have the overall story arc and then the smaller stories inside of it, and that's where issue 17 is. It's a smaller story inside of the overall story arc, to really hone in on these 3 characters. So the next 2 issues for each character is going to be that smaller story, getting to know a little bit more of the characters, a little bit more of the backstory, but also moving that bigger story forward. And it's the time travel, and it's these smaller stories that I think that once the overall story breaks around issue 32, and people will start to see, oh, okay, there's a reason why the time travel. There's a reason why the monsters. There's a reason why these kids are constantly butting heads with each other and other people. There's a reason why they're making the mistakes that they're making. And once we get to that point, I think it's going to be really fun to be able to start that progression to the overall ending, and I can't wait to get there.
And you sort of stated that it's going to be 50 issues.
50 issues, yep.
I think Ed Davis, who does the Immortal Era, who's also in my digital bundle. Mm-hmm. The Kickstarter, guys, is launching on November 1st or November 2nd, hopefully, when I get approval. It depends which time I get a high profile guest, because that's how we roll. In my world, that's very loose. But the idea is that he's doing a big series. And what's that like, really knowing that you're going for 50 issues? Because it's kind of a DC move, it's kind of a Marvel move, and it's also sort of not done on the indies for a lot of reasons.
I got a lot of same questions, like people out, why are you trying to do so many as an indie creator? And really, I mean, I guess my answer is always try to stop me. You know, it's just something. I've had the story since I was in these characters since I was 18 years old, and if I don't get it out before I croak, then I didn't do my job, I guess, on some level, I feel. You know, and it goes the same with 24 page one shots. It goes the same for 4-issue miniseries, for the 100-page graphic novels I'm getting out. These are stories that I want to tell, and I hope as many people as I can get to read them. But it's something that I just have to do. It's breathing. It's breathing. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna keep doing it till I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm so different. I'm so different on everything, and I'm odd. I only want to do one thing in comics. I want to write Teen Titans West. That's all I want to do. That's all I want to do. If I got a 6-issue run on that, I'd be done in comics. Like literally, I would write 6 issues and then I'd be done. I don't care if I have 15 other ideas. I'm out after I write Teen Titans West. Not Teen Titans. Not Teen Titans Go. Teen Titans West. Because in 6 issues, I will write the perfect 6 issues that all connect of Teen Titans West. And I will smoke every other comic that year.
Can't wait to read it.
I want to do it because Teen Titans West is fun. See, that's the problem. The regular Teen Titans, they're great. But Teen Titans West, you get like all the fun characters that you don't get in Teen Titans. You get Bumblebee in there. You get Plus and Minus. You know, technically you could put Speedy in there. You know, Aqualad. All the good guys. All the fun ones. All the characters who have a little spunk to them.
It's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to read it.
I can't wait. And also Teen Titans West Tower looks over LA versus regular Teen Titans Tower, which looks over nothing really that great. So, I mean, if you had to pick which team you would be on in the Teen Titans, Los Angeles, where the weather's nice, the women are much more attractive.
Oh, wow.
There's actual movie sets documenting your superhero positions. I mean, come on. Your TikTok videos go up all the way to the moon.
I mean, you convinced me. I'm convinced. Teen Titans West all the way. I go, ready. I'm ready to sign up. Where do I sign up?
Maybe I'll make you an honorary member. I'll just sneak all my friends into it. Oh, it'll be great. It'll be great. DC's going to kill me. And then I'll sneak all of the veterans that they also like in there, too. It'll be great. We'll make a Teen Titans Appreciation Day on one of the covers. I digress right there. So, having said that, what's funny is that DC is going to be shooting me an email in like the next hour about it. That's just going to be really funny. Like, you're going to just see me like in the middle of it, you just start reading my emails. Oh, it's going to be great. I swear to God, if I get booked for Teen Titans West, that's what I'm going to do in the middle of my interview. I'm just going to start reading the contract. but I digress. There's something that I'm actually super curious about, all jokes aside, because you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be completely misspeaking here. Not that I haven't done that like 10 times already in this interview. But I don't think you've ever been on Kickstarter.
No, I've never kickstarted. I don't do Indiegogo. You know, I'm a one-man band, and I not that I'm against it, and I have put serious thought into doing it in the future, because more eyes on it are always better than less eyes on it. And Kickstarter is a great way to be able to get more eyes on it. Really, quite honestly, it was me starting out just going, can I do this? Can I do this just by myself in a dark room? And now with multiple issues and multiple series and multiple one-shots and multiple, I'm at a point now where to where I know I can get it out, and I know I can get it out in a way that is quality and that I'm very proud of. So a Kickstarter is not out of the question. It's just something I haven't done yet. And I think with getting a Kickstarter with, I'm thinking about the next 100-plus page graphic novel that I want to start next year, and hopefully be out by this time next year-ish. We'll see how it goes. But I think maybe doing a Kickstarter for something like that, just to get my feet wet, just to see how it will go, is a good idea. And I'm still pondering that idea. Yeah, I'm still pondering it.
My mind's thing with Kickstarter is that, first off, I didn't even know how it would work because I'm not funding a book. I am funding my show. Yeah. It's very different when you're funding a podcast on this that's comic connected, versus a comic book. And also, you know, I was raising a lot of questions, and I was hemming and hawing for about a year before I decided to pull the trigger. My thing's under review. It'll be up probably on the 29th. I'm going to launch on November 1st or the 2nd. But I also am now figuring out where I do have a sponsor. I do live reads. And my question at this point, and it's all brand new, is that do I even want to go down Kickstarter? Because going down the Kickstarter realm, at least for season 3, and if season 3 gets funded, I'm going to come back for season 4. But beyond that, I don't know if I'm going to go back to Kickstarter for season 5. Yeah. And the only reason why is that I'm giving up a little bit of control. But if I fund fully on seasons 3 and 4, I'm not coming back for season 5. Okay. Because I will have more than enough money, and then I will have complete control. And so that's a whole issue where with me, Kickstarter raises stuff because you are beholden not on an equity stake, but on a reputation stake to your audience. Yeah, now, I'm going to deliver because I said this year I was going to do 150 interviews. I am going to be hitting way past that. Yeah. And next year I'm going to be hitting way past that too, or right about that. Even with me working a full-time job, I'm going to be hitting probably around 150 to 170 next year.
You're a workhorse. I've had to say it to you before. I'll say it to you again. You're a workhorse.
And that's not me. You know, it comes at personal sacrifices. I mean, it's not. If people saw my writing schedule, they'd be like, "You're writing more than half the people on Kickstarter are writing comics." Writing an interview is not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of research. I tend to be very good at it, but I also tend to not do anything on my Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Fridays. You know, I don't do anything on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and Monday night because I'm writing. And I'm writing anywhere from 12 to 15 hours a week. Just on this stuff, I'm booking guests, which is another bunch of time and a variety of other stuff. So having said all that, you Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm going through the entire Kickstarter experience right now, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do when my campaign launches. But I think I'm doing something smart, at least. Where I'm on a few shows and I'm definitely rolling down the I guess hill with it and see what happens. But I do have a battle plan that's different than everybody else's battle plan. So having said that. I was just curious about that because I've never seen anything that you've done on Kickstarter. And I was super curious about it because it is a different way to fund comics.
Yeah, I think as far as doing or not doing it, it's each their own. Every individual person is trying to put something out. Do what you feel is right. Do what you think is right for your situation. And I think that for me, the Kickstarter is something, like I said, that is kind of starting to gestate in my brain, and with the amount of books that I have out now, having the giveaways and having the content to be able to really back up a single graphic novel that I'm trying to kickstart, I think is only positive in my direction. And trying to make sure that when I do it right, like anybody who does it wants to do it right, wants to make sure it succeeds. I would know that if I did a Kickstarter and it didn't concede, I would first of all I would want to have realistic expectations on what success would mean for that. And knowing that it's me and I'm a one man band, that might be different than somebody else's version of success on Kickstarter. But whether it succeeded or didn't succeed, I would know that I did everything I could to be able to make it a success and getting the word out there as much as possible. And again, it's different for everyone. So I wouldn't, people might not be surprised if I'm on Kickstarter in the next year.
It,
But
it,
yeah,
and even talk about this, and obviously you're an outsider, and so am I at this point. But I think you've noticed it, and I think everybody has. There's been a lot of projects on Kickstarter in the last 2 years. It's a big boom. Me and Josh were speaking about it, yesterday, and the question becomes is that how sustainable is all of this? Obviously, I'm from the comic book investing world, so I view this entire thing extremely different than most people in comics because I actually buy and sell books, and there's value attached to a lot of books. And I also recognize that Kickstarter though has a lot of projects, and there are way too many on there. And I'm not saying I'm glad that people are doing well, but there's a problem coming down because whenever you have 260 projects, naturally, just from an economic standpoint, if there's 150 projects that are all offering books at $20, you either need to have a better story, better covers, cooler art, get my interest, keep me retained, have some personal connection to me, or have killer stretch goals. You need to have something that is massively division, and then even if there's 150 that are going at $10 their rewards, then we narrow that down with all those things. If they all equal down to 75, and then I wind up saying there's still too many choices, and then I go over this episode. Like that's what happens. That's legitimately what happens to me, and I'm
overwhelming. Yeah.
I think I'm pretty normal in this segment, and so I feel personally that the industry on Kickstarter is going to go through a reduction and a recession because I don't think that it can sustain itself. And I know people in the last 2 years have backed like 600 projects, and I'm like, even if you're backing at a $5 digital tier, that's a ton of money. Part of my language, everybody, but that's a lot of money to back 600 or 300 projects in the last year and a half or 2 years. That's a lot in a short amount of time, and I just think that that's going to lead to an implosion. I'm curious how you feel because I feel like we're getting into the 1990s image territory of oversaturation.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why something like Comixology that I kind of sat back for a second and put a couple books up there and to see what they were doing and kind of felt that it was getting lost in the shuffle. There was another digital platform that I put all of my books on about a year ago, and they were doing great. I had a couple books that were like the book of the month for the year that I was doing it, and it was really great, getting a lot of traction, and then they shut down. So you never really know with those smaller platforms whether they're going to succeed or not. And I did everything I could in my nothing that I can do situation to be able to help that platform, because they had helped me a lot to be able to get eyes on my book. But something um, like a Kickstarter, where I think you're right. It's like so much weight, so many different projects, so many different options. Where do you start, and where does somebody who maybe wants to back books start? Like, wasn't there a couple months ago where Keanu Reeves had a book on Kickstarter and he got like $1 billion in the span of a couple days? But somebody
It's
who,
also me and I don't think me and Josh spoke about this, but I've had conversations about this privately, and I'll stay what I think publicly. I think a lot of creatives are very egotistical, and I think they're egotistical not in the sense of good. There's good ego and there's bad ego. Sometimes if you're a comic creator, the most important person on your team is not the writer, it's not the artist, it's not the cover people, it's your marketer. And what's going on right now is that there's a lot of marketers that have entered the indie realm, and some of them are good, but a lot of them aren't bringing the value they're projecting, or they're bringing some value more than what you paid them, but they're not bringing what they promised. And it's a real issue in this, because that also hurts the industry. And I'm not going to name names, but I know for a fact that that's becoming a bigger issue. And there's marketing agencies and all that stuff that's coming into play now. And people aren't delivering. There's a reason why people pay me for live reads, because they go to these marketing places and say, well, Andrew, you got me 10 new backers, and I paid you X, and how'd you get me 10 new backers? And people are willing to buy ad space here because they understand, at least with this ad space, it stays up permanently and has just as good a shot as some of them paying the guy who's going to charge them 10 times more. And, while they only might get 6 backers or 10 backers out of this, they didn't have those people before, or they're happy to take the risk. So it's a very interesting space, and I think that's going to contribute heavily, because unfortunately I'm part of the downfall of this. And I know I am, but I also know that when all this downfalls, my ad costs are going to be a lot more, because people like me are going to be around forever. And I've been around for 8 years, and I'm not leaving anytime soon. Somebody like Josh, who was on his show, he's not leaving either anytime soon. So
I think you just hit the nail on the head there. I think for something like this, I try to remind myself every single day that there are a billion of me. There are a billion of people who are in my position trying to do what I'm doing. And I think for, like you just said, for you, for Josh, for other creators, it's longevity. It's knowing that, first of all, you love what you're doing. If you don't love it, why do it? And I think there are a lot of people out there that think that producing comics and being a publisher, trying to build a team, is like, how can I make as much money as I can on this as fast as I possibly can? And then a year later, 2 years later, you don't hear from them again. You don't see anything from them after 2 years. If you listen to
my Gamal Hennessy interview, 90% of creators don't see their initial investment back. 90% of creators aren't in this realm. Gamal said, I think, for a year. I'm going to put it at 3. I think 3 is more accurate. I don't disagree with Gamal on a lot of things in that realm. I think 3 is more of an accurate term. I think, 1 year isn't. I think most creators do not see their initial investment back. I think most creators on average are around for about 3 years and then disappear. And there's a reason why I'm not producing a comic. It's expensive. And I know that in the stock market, and I hate to say this because I'm in this business to make money, but let's not kid ourselves. It's a business to me. I enjoy what I do. I also understand that I have to serve my clients. And I have 10 different clients that I'm serving every single interview. And my interviewee is a client, whether you're paying me or not. The listener's a client. My live read's a client. My sponsor's a client. A secondary market becomes a client. Posting it into certain areas becomes a client. It's a very, very interesting dynamic. And so, but again, I'm not producing a comic book because it's expensive. And I know for a fact I could get a guaranteed X rate of return in the stock market, and I don't like to lose money. Because chances are, if I produce a comic, I'm going to lose money. I'm not going to break even on it. Very few people do. And even if you're getting signed to a big publishing deal at all these big companies, you're also might not make as much money as you think you're going to make. Just because a company like Scout, Second Sight Publishing, and I think there's 3 or 4 more, sign your book sucks. They're cutting your book. They won't give you 6 issues. There's no guarantee you're going to get 6 issues. Because if those first 2 issues don't sell, you're screwed. Doesn't matter what they did for you. Doesn't matter if they throw you into the inner circles. They'll kick you right out. No question about it. I know that if I buy the $6,000 of AT&T stock and it costs me $6,000 to buy and create a comic, one of those things I'm going to make a 7% rate of return on, just in dividends alone. Not to give money advice, but one of those things has a guaranteed dividend for me. So
there's no guarantee that any of this is going to work out for it when they start it. Again, it's for me. It's I'm doing okay, but I can't quit my day job. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where
no, you can't quit your day job because you're getting a pension. Let's not kid ourselves here. Let's not kid ourselves here. If you quit your day,
you hit it on the nose again. You keep hitting it on the nose.
If you quit your day job, I know exactly how much that's worth. I know exactly how much it's worth in New York. So we're not going to pretend here like,
Oh, yeah. I'm not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. This is what's happening. Yeah.
I used to work for the government, so I know exactly what it's worth. Yeah. So, but
it's worth a house on the beach in 20 years.
No, that's my presidency run. But anyway, Niobe Comics knows exactly what was happening. I'm going to turn Connecticut red, white, and blue all over again. Yeah. But that was a fun interview last Thursday that I was on. And Larry knows all about that. But I digress. But that's the other thing, too, that's so interesting is that I think so many people don't understand that you don't have to quit your day job to do comics either, and you shouldn't.
And I'm in a position where I'm a one-man band. I don't need to worry about it. I love working with other people, and I have been and will be and continue to work with other people who, some people come to me, some people I come to them and say, hey, do you want to do something together? Let's make something happen. Let's see, if people dig it. Like we started talking about the Sock Hop Killer, I get emails almost every day about when's number 2 coming out, when we get to see the sequel. When are we going to get the rest of the next part of the story? When are we going to get this or that? And like I said, the guy who I co-wrote it with, Paul Dulski, is already working on it. So it's those kind of connections that really, to me, continue to want me to push forward, continue me to keep doing what I'm doing. Like I said, for Austrian, I'm not stopping for 50. If I have to old man it with my paper shaking the whole way, I'm going to do it. But I'm not stopping. I'm not going to stop anytime soon. It's not about money. It's about the love of the art. And when, not if, when DC or Marvel knocks on the door and says, "Do you want to write or draw a book for us?" I'll say, "Yeah, let's do this. Let's get it done." While I'm still going to collect my pension.
Well, for me, it's all about the money. It's all about the money. But in order for me to make money, my philosophy is that, I have to provide something that is worth people spending money on.
And you have to like doing it. Right?
I enjoy doing a lot of this. I don't enjoy everything in this business, but I think it's understandable. I used to do a lot of editing, and then I really don't like editing because it's not that I don't mind editing my own work. It's just time consuming and it's numbing. It's not like I could listen to music and do editing. When I'm doing my social media, I listen to music or I watch TV and it's in the background and it goes by quicker because at least I'm not torturing, and I'll do 90 days of social media every, 90 days. I do the next 90 days and then I cover that in a matter of 2 weeks, watching Law & Order SVU on Sundays. And you get a lot done. When you're editing a podcast, it's a pain in the ass because it's just, you actually have to listen. But I digress. So we've been talking for a while, and we covered a lot of stuff. We went controversial. We talked about socks and puppets and killers and slashers and the Offspring, and the Civil War. I do enjoy the Civil War. And I was going to be my minor in college. I was going to be a history Civil War minor. It's so interesting.
It's very interesting.
It's one of the greatest history times ever. There's so much about it.
So much horrendous and cool and like just interesting stuff happens.
So the lead up to it is fascinating, and all the political stuff that was going on, and understanding even where it originated, because it just didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, this was dating back like 300-400 years before even like America was founded. It's so interesting. Then Reconstruction afterwards, that stuff was fascinating. The wars and the battles, like the actual Civil War, is not interesting at all. It really is not interesting. There's about like 4 battles that matter. Like Gettysburg is fascinating. The fact that Sherman basically burned everything down is fascinating, even the concept of it. But beyond that, everything, all the political stuff, because I'm a political science major, it's so interesting. And even understanding the mentality and understanding what was going on and what led up to it and all the history behind it. I mean, from a historical position, it is one of the most interesting things, like the debates in the Senate. And I mean, it's contentious when you go into that stuff. And it's crazy. And I'm talking like 50 years up to it. We're not talking about, it's my favorite topic to talk about. I know so much about it.
Can I say a fun fact? And you probably already know this fact since you seem to be an expert on it. So the term for prostitutes, hookers, we get that from a general whose last name was Hooker. And the women would follow their battalions. And the women started being called hookers girls, hookers women. And it just got shortened to hookers. So that's where we get the term hookers from. Isn't that funny?
You want to hear a really cool fact?
Yeah,
Trench warfare was invented in the Civil War.
What was?
Trench warfare.
Yeah.
Trench warfare was utilized in the Civil War. Most people have no idea about that. Most people think it started in World War I. Nope. It's in the Civil War. There was trenches, and that's where trench warfare was sort of really started. I mean, obviously it was in effect before, but in America we still have it. But again,
I think the military history of America has so much background in military history. I think when the American Revolution, they started realizing, why are we standing 100 feet away from each other and just shooting at each other? Why don't we like hide behind trees and stuff? And they started. With the militia started hiding behind trees. Like, this is so obvious. Why are we standing there to get shot? Why don't we sneak up on them? And then from there, the sneakiness continued in such an interesting, positive way.
Also, the greatest military trade was that we traded a dog for a Confederate lieutenant. We traded dog for a Confederate lieutenant, and because the dog was.
You can't make that stuff up.
So the dog was a POW. I'm not even joking. This dog was a POW, and we traded it for a soldier. We traded a dog for a Confederate lieutenant in a military exchange. And I just wrote about this on my website. I have connections to certain groups, but anyhow, it's great. It's great. It's Ben Towell's book. It just came out. But I digress. So having said all that, we've been speaking for a while, and I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote. So where can people find you on the internet? Where can people purchase your books? Where can people pick up The Offspring, issue 17? Obviously, where can people pick up, Sock Hop Killer and all that stuff? Obviously Amazon, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat if you got it, TikTok. All the cool kids are on TikTok.
I get a lot of play up on TikTok. I try to make as many videos as I can. Usually they're pretty goofy, but any social media, I'm on most of it. If you look up Correct Handed, I'll pop up. You'll see my hand logo, that says Correct Handed Comics on it. And links to every book I've ever created is on my website, correcthandedcomics.com. I do a lot of advertising on social media and a lot of different things. I do a lot of giveaways on social media also from time to time. I try to do one every 6 months or so where I'm giving away an issue or a one-shot or something like that. So find me on any social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. Correct Handed Comics, I'll be there.
Yeah, and I've been saying this, and I'm going to continue to say it. You have to support indie. What that means is, you actually have to go buy people's books. Whether you're buying it digitally, physically, you're buying an omnibus, You have to buy people's books first and foremost. I don't think anybody at this point cares what you buy and what format you buy, because we're all in different parts of the world. We all have different reading preferences. But you need to buy people's books. And even going beyond that, you need to follow people on social media. It is very important to follow people on Twitter and follow people's Facebook pages and check out their Instagram. And,
Like and a share go a long way.
It does. And also, just so everybody's aware, Facebook's algorithms, Twitter's algorithms, Instagram's algorithms, they're not the same as they used to be. And so when more content gets shared, it lets Facebook know that, hey, this is really good content, and let me introduce it to more people. I just went through this where I legitimately put up a post, and then in about an hour, got 14 retweets, and now it's got almost 100 retweets because Twitter said, oh man, this is kind of interesting. Let's sort of re-algorithmize it, I guess, for lack of a better word. I'm sure there's a better word for that. I'm sure somebody, if you have a word for it, please correct me. I cannot think of a better word on that point. But as I was stating, I think it's very important that it goes a long way. Also, I'm an indie content creator, so while I do have sponsors, I do live reads. I appreciate all support. Whether you're liking this video, sharing this thing out, following me on social media, coming to bother me. November 1st, November 2nd, I got a Kickstarter dropping, and I could say that you may not exactly be 100% the fit, but I'm having at least 24 books, in that for $12 digitally. And one of your books is in there. So obviously, I don't think, you're going to get a better deal as far as a digital bundle. Legitimately 24 books for $12. There might be a 25th book in there now, and there might be 30 books in there also at some point for $12. I mean, you're not going to do much better than that, I think. So obviously, come support me. Come check out what I'm doing. Check out what David's doing. Obviously, go like Correct Handed Comics. At least follow them on Twitter. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word because my throat's killing me.
CorrectHandedComics.com. Support indie comics.
I think that's a wrap.
That's it. We did it.